All right, we are back for a Monday edition of the Osceola's Seminole Sidelines. My name is Pat Burnham. I'll kind of be co-hosting the show with senior writer Curt Weiler and Osceola recruiting analyst Charles Fishbein, who obviously is in baseball mode with his Chicago White Sox hat. I'm not sure what his affiliation.
No, it's my son's baseball
all right,
team.
all right. And you're the coach. You're the head coach. All right, so we will have to find how the South Florida version of what is the Bad News Bears head coach called? Butterman, something like that. Anyway, yeah. So we'll have to get an update on that. We got a lot to cover. We're going to talk a little bit about football, a little bit about recruiting. May get some thoughts from Curt on baseball and softball, since he had baseball and softball coverage this weekend. But anyway, guys, welcome to the show. We just lost Fish. So, Curt, welcome to the show.
Good to be here, as always.
All right. So we were going to start. Here we go. Fish is back. Fish, are you back?
Yes, I am. I don't know what happened. I just disappeared there.
Well, Buttermaker is the coach for the Bad News Bears, Buttermaker. So anyway, so I'm sure. Which of the characters in Bad News Bears would your son be?
I don't know. Whichever kid's the cockiest on the team. He's a cocky kid.
That would be Kelly, the pitcher that rode the motorcycle and smoked the cigarettes as he was coming to practice.
Pretty much, man.
All right. So since you are back with us now, we're going to start with the recruiting, work our way back to football, work our way back to recruiting. All right. So FSU, as is become the normal under head coach Mike Norvell, hosted a number of top prospects, both for 2024, 2025, and 2026. When Tramel Jones, a quarterback from Jacksonville Mandarin, left the building on Saturday afternoon, he had committed to Florida State. So Florida State has a quarterback commit for 2025. So, guys, and we'll start with you, Fish. Just your thoughts on the recruitment and taking the commitment at this time, and what you think of Tramel as a player at this point in his development, and taking into consideration that he is not yet a junior in high school.
Yeah, I think it's interesting that they took a commitment this early, especially when you want to see a lot of these guys in the summer camps. Coaches like to see these guys throw with each other. You know, they've got other guys, Carter Smith, who's a top-rated quarterback out of Bishop Verot. He has an FSU offer. Knowing people close to him, I know Florida State's in the lead for him, or one of his top schools. He's got a big-time arm. He's a former, he was a baseball player as well. They had a kid out of California that was a 5-star quarterback that they had on a visit recently. So this, to me, tells me that they're very interested in bringing in 2 quarterbacks. They've had that thought process the last few years and haven't been lucky to nab 2 of them every time one commits. The one that's committed doesn't like that they're bringing in others, and he decommits. But they're in a good position now. Winning changes that. And that opportunity, it seems like this Tramel Jones kid, listening to some of the interviews, he doesn't really care that they bring some other guys in. Now, that's all good right now, but that could all change once another one decides to commit or shows interest. All of a sudden, that first kid goes, well, I didn't care, but now I do. So
I remember when Nico Marchiol didn't care if they took another quarterback commit, and then AJ Duffy committed, and all of a sudden he cared.
Yeah, it was like a week later. It's all of a sudden it was a big deal. But looking at Tramel, he's a kid that as a freshman, I don't think they would have taken a commitment early. His sophomore film was a lot better, improved at a lot of the things, especially pushing the ball down the field with accuracy. He has a lot of good traits. I still think, his main strength is his ability to run and break a defense down with his legs. He is going to have to learn how to, make those second and third reads. Right now, it's either first read or take off and run. I think that's stuff that, this coaching staff's shown with Jordan and some of the other guys that have come in when they've played, that they've been able to make those adjustments. They've done a very good job of that. Tramel's a raw kid, but you're talking a kid that's a sophomore going into his junior year. He still has 2 years to develop in high school. That's before he ever steps on the football field at Florida State.
Yeah, and like you said, both of you said, there's a lot of road to hoe before we get to this. When this class signs, we do see classes where commitments turn over. We just saw where Keyshawn Mashburn, and we'll talk a little bit about that later, Fish, because you had some interesting thoughts on whether they might be totally done with him on our message board. So I do want to talk to you about that. But listen, Tramel Jones, he's my first note when I started thinking about his recruitment, and we talked to him 2 weeks ago when he was leaving a Florida State practice. The kid wants to be at Florida State. He's definitely made that clear. And then from a physical standpoint, yes, you're right. He is young. His arms only going to get stronger. He's only going to get faster. He's only going to get quicker because he's going to develop physically. So his best football in high school is still ahead of him. He is not a finished product. The thing that impressed me about him is he does throw well, very well and accurately on the move. He and puts some really nice touch on the deep ball for someone that's as young as he is. And at times, and you're right, I think he's probably getting a throw the ball here at this point in his development. We're going to call it this play, but he does seem like he has a good understanding of where the ball is supposed to go based off the highlight film. And listen, it is highlights. Florida State has access to more probably game film than we do. I have not watched him in a complete game, but listen, the other thing I like about it is even though he's young, the kid plays against some really good competition. He's played against Bowles and Bartram Trail and schools like that over in the Jacksonville area. So anyway, he's played against some good people. He's a kid that wants to be at Florida State. And to your point, they had two other quarterbacks for 2025 on campus at the same time that they had Trammell on campus, and that was Emil Pecorella from Mississippi. And then you had Luke Nickel, who has been on campus now twice in the last 3 months. Luke says he will probably be back. So if that's the case, if these guys are telling you 2025 kids that they're going to be back, Fish, you think that Florida State probably needs to look at two quarterbacks for 2025. Do you think that's how this thing will play out at the end of the day?
Yeah, I mean, you got to look. Hey, Jordan's graduating after this year, and then you have Tate and AJ. And if Tate beats him out or Glenn ends up jumping AJ at some point, these guys aren't going to all stay. So I definitely think that 2025 class, you don't want to have only two guys on the roster heading into that following year. These two guys will add to that roster. And I think Norvell wants to keep four guys on the roster at all times, is my guess. And that's why I don't think Trammell's the only quarterback that they're going to recruit in the 2025 class.
Yeah. Curt, do you have anything you want to add to that as far as how the roster management and all those things?
I think I agree. It's a spot where, especially taking him so early, you want to keep four. You got through three last year. Thankfully, Jordan stayed healthy for you. But three is like pretty precipitous, especially when one of those guys is a true freshman who I don't think anybody wanted to play. But yeah, I think the interesting thing, not to at all say, I think you wouldn't take a kid this early if you didn't like what he brought. But you wonder, is there the bit of the tactical play here with Jamie French, the borderline 5-star receiver who was his high school teammate at Mandarin? Is there a chance when you're going to be battling some of the big boys to try and get his commitment in that class? Does that maybe help your cause a little bit? It doesn't hurt matters, especially if you like him as a prospect.
Well, yeah, and to your point, Curt, as soon as he committed, he tweeted right at Jamie French, who was on campus this weekend, and we will have more from Jamie. It's actually on our live thread from the recruiting weekend, but we will be making that an individual story, so you can certainly read about that. And he's got a couple other teammates that are pretty good high school football players at Florida State is interested in. So,
hey, you're saying they bought the cow to get the milk? Is that what you're trying to say?
Well, I'm not saying that. I'm just agreeing with Curt. There's some other players.
You don't take a kid this early if you don't like him, especially at quarterback, but it doesn't hurt matters. I think that, it might play with his teammates a bit.
Well, listen, they were obviously they have a lot of prospects on campus at all positions, but they obviously like Trammell a lot. They took him on the field with him and had him follow Tony and the quarterbacks through an entire practice a couple of weeks ago. So clearly they'd already identified him as a kid that they really like. So listen, they got one of their guys for 2025, and we'll see how this thing plays out over the course of the next 2 years. Let's just see what the roster looks like in fall of next year from a quarterback standpoint.
You got to get Krummenhoek on campus before you're worrying about that for sure.
That's right. That's right. Yeah. So anyway, all right. So let's switch it back over to Florida State football for a second, and then we'll come back with Fish to talk about Derek Plaz and some other kids that were on campus this past weekend. Curt, you and Bob are kind of locked in on what the coaches said. Now, last week, Bob and Jerry and I broke down what they said for almost an hour. We're going to try to make it a little bit more concise today. So I have taken less notes. We're going to put most of the heavy lifting on you for this segment, and Fish and I will kind of pop in and pop out as far as some of the things that we had heard but listen, scrimmage number 2, Mike, Adam, and Alex Atkins all talked to the press. So we'll start as always with the head coach. Just kind of what we got a little bit more detail out of this scrimmage. We know that the ones played about 50 snaps, the twos about 40, and the threes anywhere 15 to 20. Mike said they thought it was about 110 plays. We also know that Jordan Travis, by Mike's count, had 15 to 16 snaps. So we'll go from there and let you take the floor.
Yeah, I think, you start with Jordan because Jordan didn't play in the first scrimmage, and I don't think that was nothing injury related. It was purely, I think, he's a known commodity. We know what we have in Jordan, and you needed to. It gives you the opportunity to maximize the reps for everyone else. And I think it's interesting. Mike said Saturday, he's like, we're thinking we were going to give Jordan a couple series, and then Jordan came out, I think, led a 12-play touchdown drive to start the scrimmage, and I think everyone kind of looked at each other and they're like, okay, we're good here, Jordan. We've seen what we need to see, and I think it was, He talked pretty candidly about, I think I wasn't sure where there was room for growth or if there was room for growth. And he talked about kind of thinking he might see some of it. I think Jordan's been really good this spring. I'm interested. I can't imagine he'll do a ton in the spring game. He might, who even knows kind of what the format of that's going to be. But no, it's been encouraging that Jordan's had a healthy spring and kind of kept building on that. I think the other quarterbacks, not as good a day. I think some up and down. I think some decision-making problems is kind of what it sounds like. No, Fentrell Cypress had an interception. I think there were quite a few interceptions in all that Adam Fuller tweeted out and kind of the mission takeaway side of things. But I think a little maybe regression to the mean after a really strong start to spring from AJ Duffy, from Brock Glenn. I think, it sets up interestingly. I think the spring game will be big just from a perception standpoint of how do those guys handle it entering the offseason and in that battle to be Jordan's backup.
Yeah, Mike had mentioned that it had been an up and down performance by the 3 backup quarterbacks. And listen, obviously, one of the things he said, they were trying to do too much. I think what probably what that is a byproduct of is of one of them trying to separate themselves from the other, maybe trying to make a big play, make a big splash play, those kind of things. He mentioned that Brock Glenn looked more like a freshman this time around than the last scrimmage. So, and that was to be expected, right? They're a week longer into the spring. They've installed more. There's more variations off every play. They're seeing different things from the defense. The defense is doing, mixing up coverages. They probably ran some stuff that they did not run the week before. So that was, I think some of that was to be expected, but I do think some of, like you said, Mike did mention that there was a lot of decision making. They made some good decisions, but obviously did not make as many as they did the week before, where he was a little bit more positive about the backup quarterbacks. Not that he was negative this time, but yeah, certainly. And then of course, he mentioned a couple guys on defense. Curt, I know that you and Bob have spent a lot of time watching Omar Graham, but Mike seemed really impressed with Omar Graham.
Yeah, I think both Mike and Adam, I think, are impressed with kind of the step he's taken in year 2. In general, I've been impressed with the linebackers this spring. I feel like we've talked about, liking the top probably 3 and questions beyond that. And I think the spring has shown me a little. You have to see how it translates into the spring game. You have to see how it translates into preseason camp, because obviously that's when it means more. But yeah, I've liked what I've seen from Omar Graham. I think, I think Adam and Mike both talked about him a good bit and kind of praising him of like being really encouraged by what they've seen after kind of the redshirt year. And Adam talked about kind of like he didn't even get a real red shirt because like he didn't run scout team because he was running like third team for us. He wasn't like, it wasn't like some guys who got to kind of be on the scout team as a freshman. He was running as a reserve. And so still the progress despite that is encouraging. I'd like what I've seen from Steven Dix. And I know DeMarco Ward is another guy who, strung a few together practices that were really good last week. I know that kind of ended Thursday's practice with a really impressive forced fumble, had a few tackles for loss mix in there as well. I think another guy that Mike talked up, I know the question, not so much entering this scrimmage, but just, at this junction in the program is Derek McClendon was going to get plenty of reps. It opens a spot for people and who kind of rises to that occasion. I think by all accounts, Byron Turner had a really nice day. I think he's kind of the number 1 guy on that list, kind of top of the list guy of, well, he's probably the likely candidate to be the 4th guy behind Jared versus Patrick Payton and Gilbert Edmond. And I know he had a sack Saturday, and I think just generally has had a good spring. I think being healthy for him. I mean, if he can have an entirely healthy offseason, I think will do wonders for him, because I know they've liked what they've seen from him in practice and on special teams when he's been able to play.
Yeah, and to your point on the defensive ends, Mike actually talked about Jaden Jones a little bit too, saying that he's really an X factor, which is something we had talked about last week when we were talking about the departure of McClendon. That, listen, that's kind of a wash if Jaden Jones is healthy and comes through. And obviously, from whatever limited things that he is doing, either on the field or in the weight room or whatever, they are certainly like what they have seen and expect him to be a guy that can come in and be a factor at defensive end. And then going back to Omar Graham, Mike's comment was, I think Omar's going to be a really good player here, and he's taking great steps in his progress. And then we've heard Adam say similar things. And listen, we had noticed this as a collective group at practice. We all thought Dix looks leaner, trimmer, fitter. Not that he was ever unfit, because he's built like a statue. But listen, they said he's moving better. Something we have that Mike mentioned, that he's moving better now that he's gotten recovered from that injury. And listen, with where they are from a number standpoint, certainly if you're a Florida State fan, it's good to hear the head coach talk about Omar Graham, and obviously Adam Fuller talk about Omar Graham and the strides he and Steven Dix, and even they mentioned Lundy to a lesser extent. So that those were all good things to hear coming out of the scrimmage. Then, of course, another guy that a tremendous amount of coaches were talking about, particularly Mike and Adam, is Josh Farmer.
Josh Farmer continues to have, a pretty remarkable spring. I think he I'm writing something today kind of talking about the homegrown players. I think we talk so much about the transfer players and how they've kind of helped transform the Florida State roster. And I think the transfer players helped it on the timeline it did. But this team's going to be, I think, as good as it is, also in part because of those homegrown guys who have developed here. Your Josh Farmers, who has put on a lot of weight and built some really impressive strength. People talk about Darrell Jackson's strength. He's a former high school teammate. Josh is right there with him. I think those two are both, have a really impressive ability to wreck some offensive linemen, and we see that in practice pretty regularly. Yeah, I think, he's one of the biggest candidates for the homegrown guys and how far they've come. The job that Josh Storms and his staff have done, but also that, Josh has done. I think he talked pretty candidly to us earlier this spring about, I may not have entirely been ready for the role I was thrown into last year when Fabian went down, because he kind of, became a starter and played quite a bit of reps. But I think he grew a lot because of that. And between him, throwing in Darrell, who's played a lot of football in 2 years at Maryland and Miami, Braden Fisk, who's played a lot of football at Western Michigan. The experience in that room, and I think just the freakish strength, athleticism, fill in the blank. That room, it's funny. We were higher than we maybe should have been on the defensive tackle room last year. And part of that, Fabian got hurt early in the year and it hurt. Robert Cooper, I don't think was ever really 100%, was kind of playing through some stuff he's talked about after the fact. I think this room, this next year is going to kind of be what we thought last year's room was going to be, where it will have the depth to withstand kind of some of that attrition that happens, it feels like, every year.
Yeah, 3 years ago, we thought it was going to be a really strong room because of Marvin Wilson and the kid Corey Durden that transferred to NC State. They didn't play up to their capabilities, quite honestly. But anyway, yes, we seem to we're on target for this year's defensive line. And listen, they continue. At least Mike continues to talk about Pat Payton. Had some impactful moments, better ownership of the details at defensive end. Particularly, I think that comes to proper technique and rushing the passer, but probably more importantly, as they talked about last week, as Adam did, continue to get better in his ability to play the run within the structure of the defense. So then, of course, now, Curt, I know I've kind of converted you to where you want to go watch the offensive and defensive lines a little bit more, but you do spend a lot of time watching the defense, and Mike has mentioned Jerry and Jones now for the second week in a row coming off of a scrimmage. Kind of what are your thoughts on what you've seen from Jerry in this spring?
Yeah, I think, he's carried over. I think both him and Renardo Green have carried over, the emerging as kind of the top two guys last season. I've liked what I've seen from Jerry. I think he can be a little handsy in games and is also a little handsy in practice at times. I think sometimes some defensive holdings don't get called that might get called in a game. You don't want to leave that open to interpretation. But no, I mean, I liked what I've seen. I mean, he's had some really nice individual reps in one-on-ones, which is definitely a drill that's kind of leaned towards the wide receivers and is pitted against the defensive backs for sure. I've liked some of that. I know he's had a few takeaways in there as well. And I think, I mean, he had a year I don't think anybody saw coming last year, just from a standpoint. I think a lot of people had kind of counted him out of being a contributor, especially with what we'd seen from Amarion Cooper. And when Amarion Cooper was banged up, kind of wasn't himself all year and is now working primarily at safety this spring. He, I mean, has risen to the occasion. He did last year, and I think built on that. And I mean, it creates a bit of a dilemma where I think you have three guys you like at outside corner in Fentrell, in Renardo, and Jarian. And I mean, who knows? Maybe you move one of those other two inside to nickel and play them some there with Greedy Vance and Kevin Knowles. But it's a nice problem to have, bringing back so many guys, even if and honestly, I think there's reason to be encouraged that kind of the secondary will be improved, especially with bringing back so many guys and adding Fentrell, even if you're losing Jamie Robinson in the back end.
Yeah. Listen, one of the things that Adam said, now, he was clearly disappointed with how the safeties performed. He said we have to get a lot more productive at safety, so there is some work to be done on defense at that position. Now, Curt, a couple more guys that Mike talked about, and I'll let you when I read the quote and I read our synopsis of his quotes, Maurice Smith seems like he has firmly entrenched himself as the starting center, as long as if everything stays healthy and where they are. He kind of mentioned that it looks like the battle is for who's the second guy at that group between Roddick and Quayshawn Sapp. And then he mentioned that they got Darius watching some reps. Kind of what was your takeaway from what he said about Maurice?
No, I mean, I kind of thought that coming into the spring. I guess Casey, I thought, could give him a battle, but Maurice is definitely, I mean, I talk about the homegrown guys, another guy who's kind of been through that fire. And I think there were at times, I mean, especially you look at coming into last year, I think we thought Caden Miles could very well take the job from Maurice, and maybe he would have if he hadn't got hurt. But I think now Maurice is established enough where if he's healthy, he's going to be out there. And yeah, now it's about building that depth so that, I mean, ideally, we'll see how things shake out. I would say it's probably ideal that they have a backup center who's not starting somewhere else on the line. So if Maurice were to go down, I mean, you see a lot of offensive line attrition over the course of a season too. You're not moving one of your guards or even one of your tackles to center to be snapping the ball. Ideally, it could be a plug and play, have a backup who's able to plug in. Be that Casey Roddick, who's been working there. I know he's never worked there before, he kind of told us. Or be that Darius if maybe Casey's at one of the guard spots. It's I mean, yeah, it's about building that and building them confidence. I think Casey, you've seen some moments. I think he's had good days and he's had days where it looked like he's learning how to snap well, dealing with a guy who's about to hit him. I mean, it's probably next to quarterbacks, I might tell you, one of the tougher positions on a football team to play for sure. Just with the challenge of, I mean, it's like a long snapper, but they can hit you right away. It's not, you don't have like the rules against being hit. So yeah, building depth there.
Yeah, you start off playing with one hand and try to get the other one involved.
Yeah.
One of the questions I have for you, Curt, the loss of Micah Pittman to the injury, you've heard about Portier, you've heard about Johnny Wilson having good camps. Winston Wright was a guy they brought in last year, had the horrific injury in a car accident. How has he come along? Do you feel like he has a chance to be the guy in the slot, or will it be somebody else on the roster?
I think there are going to be a lot of guys in the slot, but I think he's absolutely going to be a guy. I wouldn't be surprised if he were the starter there. I mean, I think last year I know, was pretty adamant about trying to get on the field in some capacity, and you watch him in practice, and he just never really looked comfortable. He's looked full go. He's looked comfortable. He's been impactful and productive this spring. He's kind of looked like, I think, the player Florida State thought they were getting. I think it is good to bring him up because, yeah, I think he's impressed. I mean, he's been the guy after never getting there last fall, after looking like he's still getting his feet under him a little bit. His feet are fully under him, and having that be the case now when he has kind of a full summer to maybe even take that to another level, like maybe there is another level. I wouldn't be surprised to see if there's another level from where he is now, but he's been impressive. He's looked like the player they thought they were getting.
Yeah, and listen, another player that Mike brought up, and then we'll move to Adam and Alex. But we talk about how deep this tight end room, and it looks like maybe Jarrell Powers is started to make a move in his development because Mike's comment has a great future in front of him at Florida State. So that just adds to the weaponry at tight end, where he's mentioned Kyle Murlock and Jaheim Bell and obviously Marquise Douglas. So he's even mentioned Brian Courtney. So he's right now going through 9 days of spring. He's mentioned five of the tight ends. So obviously we've seen Jarrell on Tuesdays and Thursdays, but we have not seen him on Saturdays. Actually, I wonder if Mike is a Jimmy Buffett fan, because one of his last albums was Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Saturdays. I wonder if that's how he came up with his spring schedule. I'm not sure. But anyway, all right. So let's turn it over to Adam Fuller and Curt, get your thoughts on what he said. A couple of the highlights, slow start, but lots of reps, good clean day. And then he mentioned about more production from safety. Then he talked a little bit about the guys on the other side of the ball, skill-wise, that were standing out to him. But just what were your takeaways? How do you feel like he felt about the overall day that the defense had based on what he said?
Yeah, I think, it was not the first scrimmage where, in the Jordanless first scrimmage, I think you talked about, it was a great day for the defense. The offense maybe got going late, but on the whole, I think the kind of talk was about the defensive front set the tone. It didn't feel like that was exactly the same case this time around. I think, Jordan leading that first touchdown drive to start things off obviously played a role there. But yeah, I think what he talked about kind of was, there were the plays. I know Fentrell had a pick. I think there were a number of turnovers. I think they also kind of talked about, I think we gave up a few too many explosive plays. And it's funny, that was not a problem for this defense last year. Some of that may just be a factor of, I think this offense is going to generate a lot of explosive plays. And I think they're not going to be able to take them all away by any means. But yeah, I think he, like you talked about with the safeties in particular, it was kind of a group that felt like he was subtweeting a bit of calling them out. I think you talk about, or you hear, I think coaches definitely use the media a bit to talk to their players. They know players often go back and watch those interviews to hear like what they said about them. And I felt like a bit of a situation without the safeties. So I don't think as good a day as the first day, but I don't think it wasn't a bad day by any means. Like we heard about the struggles the backup quarterbacks had. I think the defense was still creating havoc, wrecking some havoc.
Yeah, and listen, obviously they were out with some of their top line players. We know that there were some guys that were limited. They got some snaps, but it wasn't like it was. They were playing all everybody that's going to be a starter played all 50 snaps against as ones. We know that. I think he mentioned Jared Verse had a limited action. I believe he said the same thing about Tatum Bethune. So we know there were some guys that weren't out there that will be there when they line up against LSU. And as we pointed out this week, and as you are correct to point out now, they did not have to go against Jordan Travis last week, and that makes a significant difference. Now, they did ask Adam a question about guys that he has noticed on offense. This was about receivers, right? And what we've seen, Kentron Portier has continued to get better and better, and Adam talked about him. We've talked about Dre Jacobs. His name came up in that conversation. And to your point, at slot, Ja'Kai Douglas, his name came up from Adam. Just talk a little bit about, the significance of those three guys being recognized by the defensive coaches as guys that are kind of giving them some issues.
Yeah, it speaks to the depth of this group. Kentron made a few plays last year. I think took a step forward in his production, but still wasn't like a hugely impactful year. He's not a guy who had 500 receiving yards or anything. So, but it's from everything I've seen, it doesn't surprise me that Kentron had a big day Saturday. He's been great all spring. He's been a day in and day out playmaker, and I think Alex Atkins, we can talk about him a little. He talked about kind of like that's a guy who committed to developing and has just got gradually better and better every year, and just how impressive that's been to witness, to where now, he's probably a contender to start opposite Johnny Wilson, to kind of step into that Pokey Wilson spot at one of the starting receiver jobs. I think he's absolutely a contender there. And Dre Jacobs has definitely been, I think Hakeem's had some good days lately. Hakeem's looked like he's getting more comfortable, but Dre Jacobs has been the impactful freshman addition, I would say. I mean, he's been just a pretty remarkable playmaker, honestly. It seems like every day at practice, he makes a type of play, be it in one-on-ones or 11 or 7-on, that kind of draws like a audible reaction from really both the team and the media watching practice. Like whoever's out there watching, I mean, definitely gets a reaction. He's a playmaker all the way. And it's been, I mean, I think it's early. I think Hakeem could come on this summer, and I wouldn't be surprised if they both have roles, but I would circle him as more likely probably to play right away because of how impactful he's been. And I mean, it seems like obviously his prospect stock went up after committing to Florida State, but it seems like a diamond in the rough type where, I mean, considering what he was ranked when Florida State got in on him and he committed that it seems like a definite diamond in the rough.
Yeah, he probably should have been ranked higher than he was based on what he did in high school. There's no doubt about that.
Especially his senior year. It feels like sometimes you don't want to overreact too much to a senior year relative to maybe what they did in earlier years. But didn't he lead the state of Florida in touchdown catches last year?
I believe that's the case. He was one of the top receivers in the state statistically.
Yeah.
I do know that. And a guy that, listen, to his credit, we thought he might be a little bit too underdeveloped physically to be much of a factor, and he's come on, and we'll see how it goes. But certainly a guy that has been caught the eyes of everyone, the offensive coaches, the defensive coaches, and even us guys that sit up in the baseball stadium and watch practice. So he's
talking about the wide receiver group at large. I mean, it speaks to, that you don't hear Johnny regularly mentioned in these, and people know what Johnny Wilson's going to be. But that you hear so many other names mentioned in addition to Johnny, who's been great this spring. Not to take away from Johnny. It speaks to how deep that room is. I mean, it's pretty crazy the questions we had 12 months ago about this group, and I mean how severe the questions were of like, is this group going to hold back what could otherwise be a really good team to how we think of them now? I mean, it's quite a revitalization by Ron Dugans.
Yeah, and another guy they continue to talk about, and I was a fan of his. I thought he came in should have had way more fanfare as a signee than he did, and that's Quindarius Jones. Adam said they are expecting him at where he is right now, that he's a guy that can contribute as a true freshman. Basically intimated that he is as far along as you can expect him to be at this point, having only had 9 college football practices. And is as skilled as anyone that they have brought in at 6'2" and 200 pounds at cornerback. So anyway, pretty with the guys they have brought in, that is pretty high cotton, and a great compliment from Adam.
Yeah, and he talked last week. So it's interesting. He talked last week about, after the first scrimmage, I guess 2 weeks ago, about kind of like, he's like Quindarius, like he compared Quindarius maybe more to a Shyheim Brown, who didn't play as a true freshman, but then came on as a redshirt freshman and was like a really impactful rotational player. And maybe he compared a KJ Kirkland to, I think, more of a Omarion or a Kevin Knowles, a guy who's more ready to play as a freshman. But yeah, I think how much Quindarius plays, especially with their depth at corner this year, kind of remains to be seen. But I think he's a guy who they think could have a Shyheim-like jump as soon as 2024 and kind of be that really impactful redshirt freshman when they're probably going to be replacing, how many guys? Renardo, Jarian, maybe Fentrell, that could be a pretty long list of guys they're replacing at cornerback entering 2024.
All right, we'll finish with Alex. What was your takeaway from what offensive coordinator Alex Atkins had to say post-scrimmage?
Yeah, I think talked about a lot. I liked a lot what he said about we talked about already the homegrownness. He talked about Kentron and the homegrowns and kind of wanting those guys to get love. I also like what he said about. We have a group we haven't talked about, the running backs, and I know the running backs, the top two, Trey Benson and Lawrence Toafili, who normally have kind of non-contact jerseys in practice, they were live Saturday, and I think both of them made plays in that moment and kind of rose to the occasion a bit. And I know, he talked about kind of like he pulled them into a separate meeting and he thanked them because he kind of said he called that group the workhorses of the offense. And I think, there's no doubt that, his offensive line plays a role in it, but I think also they have playmakers there. And I think he's well aware that the offensive line's making the running backs better. The running backs making his offensive line better. And I liked what he just was said about that group. He called that group's mentality elite and praised David Johnson, Yak, for the job he does.
I wonder if Rodney Hill's performance last week had anything to do with those guys going live on Saturday.
Yeah, it speaks to, I mean, a deep running back room, and also kind of how things were last year, that after the first scrimmage, it was all Rodney Hill, and it was Trey Benson and LT after the second scrimmage. I mean, that room is loaded with playmakers, and it might just be a different guy every Saturday.
And I think everyone will be fine with that because they're all talented. So, all right. Well, Curt, now anything else from Alex you want to talk about? And if not, do you want to stay on while we talk recruiting, or do you want to just give us a quick synopsis of baseball and softball now? Because I know we don't want to get too far in the weeds with baseball.
We'll talk. I mean, we can talk. We'll do baseball. We'll do softball at a later date. I actually didn't cover them any over the weekend. I was on other stuff, but yeah, I don't know. I mean, there's a chance this is kind of the rock bottom of the season and things turn around. There's a really tough stretch. It bears mentioning. The losing streak's tough. It's historic. I mean, a 9-game losing streak is 3 games longer than any in program history, which is a crazy stat that speaks to the consistency of this program all time, no doubt. Yeah. It was, I mean, the last 7, not counting the 2 against Boston College, although against Boston College also ranked, were against, I mean, really good teams that are loaded with talent, and you're in a bad spot not having Wyatt Crowell. It's possible that Tuesday starts a turnaround of sorts, or at least like stopping the free fall. They're hosting JU. It's a game. Okay. I mean, you should win regardless of anything else. And then you're hosting a Clemson team that's, I know, also had some struggles early this season under a first-year head coach. And so that feels like an interesting opportunity also at home. It's possible that things turn around. It's no doubt. I mean, I'll continue to say this hasn't changed anything about my opinion of Link Jarrett long-term at FSU. I always thought he was going to have to hit the portal hard. Nothing has changed that. I mean, I had some overreactions on Twitter yesterday. I had one person say that this is worse than Willie Taggart at Florida State. And to that I say, you must have short-term memory loss, because false.
Well, most Twitter reactions are overreactions to begin with, right?
And yes. It's not a place that most people come to for rational debate.
That's right. And also, listen, and to your point, as I've said every time we've talked about this not being the baseball season that Florida State wanted, there's a reason Link is here. And it is to get this program back to where they want it to be. This is no different to when any other coach takes over a program that's not where the fan base and administration want it to be. And you're right, it is way too early to make any synopsis on whether this was, have any doubt to whether Link. We saw what Link did where he's been before. History generally repeats itself. He's got a better program to recruit to than any place he's ever been. So I think it's just a matter of time. Take your lumps, continue to move forward. Continue to allow him to establish his program, his culture, and get the guys in here he wants.
No doubt.
All right. Well, Curt, we appreciate the update on baseball. Appreciate your thoughts on what the coaches had to say on the scrimmage weekend. And Fish, man, now we're going to get into some recruiting. And listen, the one thing that we have talked about is this staff works at recruiting. You do not see a lot of staffs, at least when I was in college football, including 7 years at South Florida and 3 years at the University of South Carolina. We would host kids on weekends, but it was come to practice, hang out, we'll chit-chat for a few minutes. There wasn't a tremendous amount of structured things going on during their visits. It's more come watch practice. We'll talk at the end of practice. Everybody goes their own way. Florida State had a number of high-profile prospects, including Christian Clark from Phoenix, Arizona, a 4-star running back, Booker Pickett, a 4-star defensive end from Tampa Wharton, Wardell Mack, a 4-star defensive back cornerback from Wardell from Louisiana, Moriarty, I can't pronounce it. It's wherever David Johnson is from. But anyway, listen, his film was great. Ricky Knight, cornerback from South Florida, who has announced his official visit date. We'll get to that later. But we did have another offer come out of this weekend. Derek Plaz from Jacksonville, Andrew Jackson High School, 6'6", 265. Got an offer from Florida State coming out of this junior day. He kind of reminds me a little bit of the Ty Hilton kid from Oviedo. As kind of a late developer, a guy that's just now growing into his body. What were your thoughts when you watched Derek on tape?
Yeah, I mean, the common theme with Florida State right now with these offensive linemen, they're bigger, 6'6". You're talking about a kid that is a traditional tackle size guy. It's not one of these 6'3", 6'4" guys that they've been having to take just to have tackles outside. He's big, he's long, athletic kid. You can tell he moves real well on film. He does need to improve his lower body strength. There's times where he initiates contact and the guy kind of pushes him back. I think that's stuff you can work on. Anything from a physical standpoint, getting in a college weight program can fix a lot of those issues. His technique's pretty solid. He still could work on a few things, but overall, he's what you want a left tackle to be: big, long, athletic. I've always said if they have the traits, everybody looks at these kids when they go to camp, and you know how this is. They go to a camp, they get beat on a rep, and everybody goes, oh, the kid can't play. That's not how you judge offensive and defensive linemen off these camps. One, when I look at them, and I think you probably look at some of the same traits, are they big, they're long, they're athletic, can they move laterally, and mainly, can they be coached? Are they coachable? If they're coachable and they're willing to put in the time, get in that weight program, like this type of kid right here, the sky's the limit. And the only thing now with a lot of these guys is you want patience, but at the same time, they got to develop quickly because you have that portal. And if kids don't play by year 2 or 3, all of a sudden that kid that used to be starting as a redshirt junior where you want them to really play and start, you got to look at that and make sure that they're willing to wait their turn where they end up in the portal and somebody else gets that developed player.
Well, and listen, I think what we're going to see is more colleges be a lot pickier about who they offer from an offensive and defensive line standpoint because they know they can go into the portal and get a guy that has been developed at another college. So we'll see how that works out. But yeah, listen, my notes were can bend really well for a guy 6'6". I think he's put on about 40 pounds in the last year or so. So a kid that he plays with a mean streak. Listen, he locks up on defenders, does a good job of trying to run his feet. He doesn't overextend in pass protection, which is what most high school kids do. And like anyone that's ever played offensive line, at times he has a tendency to get his base too narrow, and that's when you get thrown off of when defenders can get rid of you. And we've all done that as offensive linemen. But yeah, listen, a lot of athletic ability, a guy that has great size and length, and when you watch his demeanor on the field, a guy that should be able to fit into a very physical run game. And I think that's where his biggest area of improvement is, because he does have good change of direction and pass protection, and runs pretty well when you see him run downfield. So yeah, he kind of reminds me. He's a little bit bigger version from a height standpoint of Ty Hilton from Oviedo, but they seem to have found a type of kid that they are looking for on the offensive line under Alex Atkins, at least from a high school standpoint. All right, so let's move on to some other kids that were on campus. A kid that we were really impressed with after we took a look at his film, and that is Christian Clark, a 4-star running back. He is the second-rated all-purpose running back in the country, ranked by Rivals. He goes to Mountain Point High School in Phoenix, Arizona. He does have some connections to Florida State. His mother, Shannon, went to Florida State, and she actually worked in the recruiting office with football when she was a student. And then he is the, I believe, nephew of Kenny Felder, who was a former Florida State quarterback and baseball player back in the late 80s, early 90s. And even though he is from Phoenix, he spent a lot of his summers as Christian did, as a young kid in Destin and Niceville. So he's not necessarily unfamiliar with the area or with the football program. But listen, Fish, talk about what it means and how Florida State has come and trying and getting a kid from Phoenix out here. And this seems to be a very self-aware kid. He's, he loved his visit. There's no doubt about that. He mentioned the word love or loved certain parts of his visit several times. But just talk about your impressions of getting him on campus and what you saw from him on tape, which if you watch his huddle highlights, there's a hell of a lot to like.
Yeah, I'm biased towards Florida kids and usually guys from the Southeast. so it takes something for me to see on film for me to get excited. And this kid, he has a little amply in him. He does a lot of jump cuts, and he can cut on either foot and get guys off balance, and he makes defenders miss when he comes through that hole. Doesn't have great top-end speed, but you got to like what he sees. He constantly is picking up yards. I think he's one of those guys that will be moving forward all the time and not lose yards. He could keep you in those short yardage situations. It's a lot better when you pick up 3 yards on first down and it's 2nd and 7 than a guy that loses 3 yards. So I really like his overall game. He's got very good feet. That's the one thing I look at a running back is his ability to just basically control how he runs. He runs real well. This is a type of kid also can catch the ball out of the backfield, can be used as a receiver. There's one play on his highlight where you see him go up and high point the football with 2 defenders. I think one guy's in front of him and behind him. So he has really good ball skills. I think he's a top-rated type back. This would be a big-time get, especially behind the guy they already have committed to him in camp, the kid from Georgia. So they pull these 2 types of kids. You got to like where FSU sits at the running back spot the next couple of years.
Yeah, listen, he did not commit to an official visit, but he has not committed to an official visit anywhere. But yeah, listen, really good change of direction, powerful lower body, great balance. As you said, good ball skills in the passing game, and that was quite a phenomenal catch on that particular play down the sidelines. And I think what probably most impressive to me, just watching his highlights, was, listen, he finds green grass. It does not matter how big or small the hole is. His ability to maneuver in traffic is pretty special. You don't see a lot of kids that do that. Now, he can jump cut. He's got great change of direction, but he's not dancing around a lot even when he's in traffic. He's finding that little narrow crease, and he gets through there. And, he does – and like you said, I had very, very quick feet, good straight line speed, but not elite straight line speed.
The one thing you notice with him is that a lot of backs, especially at the high school level, they like to bounce it outside and use their speed to outrun a defense. Every kid wants to just outrun a defense. You see on film, he's very patient, and if he sees a hole, whether it's to his right or left, he can adapt to that and make that cut and get through the hole. A lot of guys can't do that. He's already a very polished running back. He's a guy that I feel he could play right away. I think he understands the game. And you put him in a zone blocking scheme, he's going to find that lane and run, and he'll have a lot of nice runs in college. So I think he would be a big-time get for them.
Yeah, and he was very complimentary. He said, I knew I was going to love it when I came for my visit, but I love it even more than I thought. He talked a lot about the fact that, he really liked what he likes the brand of offense that Mike Norvell runs, particularly running the ball. He talked a little bit about how they run the inside zone is a lot similar to how his high school runs inside zone. So, but yeah, I love the coaches, love the culture that Coach Norvell is bringing to the program. Was very complimentary of the running back group at Florida State. Said all 5 of them treated me like a little brother as soon as they met me. As far as his relationship with Coach Johnson, David Johnson, running backs coach, great guy, said Clark of Johnson. I love him already. So listen, it was a great visit for him. I don't think he's out on his skis when it comes to recruiting, above his skis when it comes to recruiting. I think he has taken everything in. He had mentioned that he's going to be, no matter if he's chooses a school on the West Coast, he's going to be just as comfortable there because he's got family out west and he's got plenty of family on the East Coast. So he is open to going to either side of the country. And then when we asked him, I jokingly asked him, hey, Christian, where does FSU stack on your list of favorites compared to where they stack up with your mother? And he just kind of laughed and he says, my mom is always going to be a Seminole. And they're still high on my list is what he said. So anyway, he's a kid that's got it wide open. He's got offers from Alabama, Arizona State, Colorado, Georgia, Oregon. He did mention Oregon and USC specifically, UCLA and Utah. So anyway, I think he's a kid that we're both very impressed with. And then a kid I know you really like, defensive end Booker Pickett from Tampa Wharton. I had not watched his film in a while, but, he did mention that FSU was in his top 9 and indicated that maybe they were moving up that list of 9 schools. He did not delve into where any one school stood. Just to give you your He was very complimentary of the way the defensive ends played. He was very, he didn't even know Jared Verse's name. He just said number 5 who plays football.
Yep.
So he was impressed with the way the kids played, how the defensive ends are used in Florida State's system. So just talk a little bit about your thoughts on Booker, his recruitment, and where he stacks up in Florida State's priorities.
Yeah, I don't know what you saw on film. I had a chance to see him last week at the Rivals camp. You always want to see what these kids looking like in person. I think he is either a 3-4 outside linebacker or a stand-up rush end type guy off the edge. I don't know if he's a traditional D end, and I don't know if he has the size to really get that big. I mean, you never know these kids get to college all of a sudden. He's very long, very athletic.
Very long.
He looks like a linebacker. I've sent you guys footage from the camp last week. He's thinner than Lamont Green's kid coming in, but Lamont's son has a lot wider shoulders, bigger back. I just think this kid's going to be in that 235, 240-pound range. If he can learn how to play linebacker and be that guy that could cover tight ends, play guys running backs out of the flat, I think he could be a hell of an outside linebacker in Florida State's scheme. He has all the physical talent as far as being twitchy. He gets up the field real quick.
He's
very explosive. He is what you want from a pass rusher. These guys, the Will Anderson types, the guys that you can play off that defensive end and just bring him up the field and let him just go after the quarterback and attack. You could see why so many schools want him. The speed and quickness that he has is his biggest traits. The whole thing is how big will he get at that next level? Like I said, I think if he could play that outside linebacker position, he'll be a lot more versatile because you could do so much. He's kind of like a Micah Parsons type where you could just kind of move him around, bring him up the middle on a blitz, bring him off the edge, bring him off of either side. I think he has a lot of versatility, and you could see why these colleges like him.
Yeah, listen, he's 6'6", 200 pounds. That's what we have him listed as. To your point, my first note was extremely, extremely quick off the ball, covers a lot of ground very quickly, closes down the line well versus the run away from him. We'll have some development to do, particularly when it comes to taking on blocks versus the runs. You don't see that in his tape on his highlights. Now, he may be more adept at that than we think, but most kids are enamored by getting to the quarterback, and that's what they want to put on their highlights. But listen, their FSU is involved with him. His quote was, FSU have gone up for sure. I like them a lot. I like the environment they have here. The other schools involved in his recruitment, as you well know, Fish, but for some of our readers, subscribers, and listeners, Miami, Penn State, Georgia, Ohio State, Tennessee, Louisville, South Carolina, and USC. And by USC, I mean, obviously, USC West. But anyway, yes, it's going, listen, he says he talks to Coach Fuller on a regular basis. But the good news is Florida State seems like they've gone up on his board coming off this visit, and he is an extremely talented player. Listen, with his size, and I'd have to go back to look at his pictures, look at the broadness of his shoulders, but he's definitely a guy that could get to 220. Most kids are going to gain 15 to 20 pounds naturally when they go to college. You add a strength program on that with a ton of calories of the right things going in your body. If this guy's a 6'6", 240, 250-pound defensive end, wherever he goes to college in 2 years, would not surprise me at all. So, but yeah, a good day for FSU with Booker Pickett based on his reaction. Another kid that they were very happy to get on campus is Wardell Mack. He is a tremendous football player, Fish. I don't know. He plays outside corner, inside corner, or nickel corner in high school. Also plays running back, also plays quarterback, also plays receiver. My first note was he's just a tremendous football player. He's a guy that's high on LSU's board, and a guy that they were very much looking forward to getting on campus. And listen, probably the best news for Florida State coming out of that visit is that he said he did not know when, but that he did plan to come back for another visit to Florida State. He is 6'1", 175. He is the 5th rated cornerback target in the 2024 class and ranked as a 70th best, 70 best overall prospect.
You'll get it eventually. But listen, The one thing, and there's a trend here, the Randy influence in the secondary recruiting. They're recruiting a lot bigger, longer, more athletic guys. I know because I've dealt with Randy for a long time. He really likes guys above 6 feet tall. He likes big, long, athletic corners, mainly because if they're versatile enough, if they don't work out a corner, you could always slide them in a safety. You could put them in the nickel. He wants these guys. His size and length on film, I don't know what he is like in person, but his recovery speed is very impressive. That was very impressive on film. Tackling needs some improvement. You could see he comes in kind of a little sloppy, puts his head down. That stuff, technique, once again, that's stuff that coaches at the college level. You don't see guys running by him. I like the fact that, too, this kid does not mind coming up. He can be used in a blitz situation off the edge. Florida State likes to bring that corner blitz or bring him up the middle if he was a safety blitz. He's very impressive. When you watch his film, you could see these are the type of kids that play at LSU and Alabama and go in the first round of the draft every year. You could see why Florida State likes the kid.
Yeah, listen, and I looked up his huddle highlights, and he's got listed as his 40 time as 4.58. He looks a hell of a lot faster than me. He plays faster than that.
Well, I mean, instincts too. If you know where you got to go before the snap of the ball, and you're thinking fast. There's guys that run 4.4, but they have terrible instincts and they play slow, and they can run a 4.4 on a track. So you know how that works out. A lot of guys have football speed. He has that football speed. He looks like the guys that you see on Saturdays at every SEC school. He looks like an Alabama or LSU corner, and this is why you want this kid on your team.
Yeah, listen, his probably the quote that probably people would be interested in most. We ask him, the Coach Norvell talks a lot about fit. What makes Florida State a good fit for you? And his response was the home culture. And then we asked him about his meeting with Coach Norvell, and he said it was intense. I can't say much, but I can say that. And we asked him what he likes about Mike, and he goes, I like how intense he is with his players. He is on the players about academics and athletics, and he won't let anything slip up. So that is the one thing I do like about this program. They care about the person and just not the player. I'll be back for sure. Can't say when, but it'll be soon. So good news for Florida State on the Wardell Mack front. And then, of course, a guy you're very familiar with, because I think you might have had something to do with turning him on to a lot of colleges. Ricky Knight III was on campus, and probably the biggest thing coming out of that was, again, he seems to be really all in on Florida State, and he has set an official visit date for June 15th through 17th. Fish, you know a lot more about Ricky than I do, so I kind of give you the floor on this kid.
Watch what they do, not what they say. This kid is –
That's true.
This kid's on Florida State's campus more than some of the players on their team. He seems like he's there every weekend. Ricky's a true South Florida typical corner, long, athletic, can run, can change direction, very fluid. And he's got football smarts. You could tell on film or when you see him at camps, high football IQ. I think the game's going to come easy to him. He comes from a very good program. This is a kid that Florida State would love to lock down early in the process. When you could get possibly a Lester and a Charles Lester and a Ricky Knight, you basically are getting two potential guys that not only are going to play on Saturdays, but down the road maybe on a Sunday. So he would be a big-time get. You got to like what he brings. Like I said, he has all the physical traits that you look for in a corner, everything you want. He seems to have those traits, and this is a kid that kind of came out of nowhere and has blown up over the last 2 or 3 months.
Yeah, and listen, let me ask you this. Again, it would be our opinion. Obviously, we don't know exactly how the coaches have them ranked on their board, but how would you, if you had Knight, Lester, and Mack, and could get 2 of the 3, who are you taking?
Well, the one thing is, and you know how it is, I know you asked a question. They all kind of play different positions. I think that, I think Mack will be more that slot corner. I think that Ricky will probably be more the boundary corner, and then you got Lester that will be a field corner. So that they'd hit the trifecta in defensive back recruiting, because all 3 they'll hit those positions. But they're versatile enough that if you don't land all 3, you can basically move these guys around. Mack really impressed me at the Rivals camp. I wasn't as impressed with them last year. But there were so many DBs, like they had Conrad Hussey and they had another defensive back. Mac really impressed me at the Rivals camp. He went up on my board of a guy that, like I said, he could play slot or you can move him outside. He's got that ability to play multiple spots. And he also may be able to play safety as well.
Yeah, and another thing that stood out when we talked to Ricky after he was done is, and listen, his family may have been here before, but I think it was the first time that his family was with him. That's a big deal if you're a recruit, because once you start getting the family involved, that means you've probably got a very sincere interest in that particular college, unless you just got a parent that travels with you everywhere, which some kids do. But the only other official visit he has set up at this time is Penn State, which will be the first weekend in June. Then he'll take a weekend off, then come back to Florida State that third weekend. I believe it's the third weekend in June. But anyway, so listen, he's got two set, Penn State and Florida State, and so he certainly had nothing but positive things to say about Florida State at the end of this visit. Now, last week, I don't think I got to talk to you about this. I think you were busy today, but they got the number one offensive guard in the country on campus, Jordan Seaton, who had a top 14. Florida State was not in that top 14, so that they were fifth. Let's just say they were 15th coming into that unofficial visit. He came out of that unofficial visit saying that he no longer had a top list of schools. How do you read into that? What do you think about the kid? He seems like he's pretty pragmatic when it comes to his recruiting process. It sounds like he's also kind of cagey, like he's kind of keeping it open. And as Bob says, sometimes in the world now, this new world of NIL, maybe he's just creating leverage when he does these kind of things. But anyway, what are your thoughts about getting a guy like Jordan Seaton on campus and some of these other top prospects that we've seen?
I'll just say this, man, things have changed in like less than 3-4 years when Florida State was trying to take the Chaz Neals of the world and try to turn them into, prospects. This kid's, real big kid. You saw him on campus. He's a big body kid. He's going to only get bigger. I had the chance to see him play last year against Chaminade. He struggled a little bit, but that's a lot of times that happens when you get these real big kids and they go against a 6-foot defensive end. If they don't get their hands on them, those guys give him a lot of problems at the high school level. He's not going to face those type of kids at the college level. He's going to be facing guys that are 6'3", 6'4", and he doesn't have to literally bend down to his ankles to block a guy. He has the traits. I still think he's a little raw. He does need a little work. I like Jimothy Lewis a little better just because of his ability to laterally change direction, but he's a guy that could play right tackle, potentially also move inside a guard. You could never have enough of these big athletic guys. And if Florida State could get in on him, you got to take guys like this, because big guys that can move are rare to find. And especially like this, these high level kids that, everybody wants, if they could get even in the top 5 and you want to be in the top 5, this 15, you're asking me you're going against 14 other schools. You're asking a lot to beat out all those schools. But if they could get into his final 5, get one of those official visits, I think that'd be huge for them.
And that's what I always say. Listen, 99.9 of these kids are going to sign at one of the schools they take an official visit to.
Yep.
You'll have an outlier every now and then where he has visited a local school so much in his backyard that he doesn't need to waste an official. He takes 5. But listen, we've got if you're an Osceola subscriber, we have a ton of interviews, both video and written, on these kids, and video interviews with Christian Clark, the 2024 running back, Wardell Mack video interview and written interview. Same thing with Christian Clark, 2025 defensive end project, Javion Hilson video interview, Ricky Knight video interview, Amari Williams, highly thought after tight end, defensive end from your neck of the woods, Fish, was on campus, and we've got a video interview with him, as well as the wide receiver from Jacksonville Mandarin, 4-star, 5-star kid, Jamie French, who 4-star, and the 50th best overall prospect in the class of 2025 was on campus. More from Booker Pickett, Luke Nickel, the quarterback from Milton, Florida, Carter Jones, a 2025 linebacker they had on campus from California, was here. He is a 3-star linebacker. And he was all the way out from Irvine, California. So listen, We got OJ Romanus Frederic. So we got a lot of stuff to for our listeners or for our subscribers to read, watch, and hope you guys enjoy that. Fish, any other recruits you want to hit on before we get off?
No, we went over pretty much the top guys that they brought in over the past couple weeks. There's going to be more. You know how it is throughout this process. That used to be 4 or 5 months of the year. Now it's a yearly process. We'll be having more discussions about this.
Yeah, and now listen, this will be about the first time Florida State has this weekend, right? As we know it now, they're not going to have any recruits on weekend for the Easter holiday, and I think everyone from the people that cover the program to the staff itself will be glad to have a free Saturday. But anyway, they have been working hard in recruiting, and it as everyone always says, hard work works. And it certainly seems to be working on the recruiting front for Mike Norvell and his staff as they've had another impressive weekend. All right, Fish. Well, we did not get we'll move away from football. I'll just finish off with some other things. All right, so my dream of FAU beating Miami in the national championship game tonight is not going to happen. We're going to get to see UConn, who throttled Miami against San Diego State. Who do you have?
Yeah, listen. I don't tell people to put money on teams, but I just don't see UConn losing. That's the best team I've seen, and I haven't watched a ton of college basketball this year, but I just saw them once in round 1 of the playoffs. In the field, I told my buddy, I go, that team's probably not going to lose the rest of the way, and I'm not surprised. I see this a game being a 15 to 17 point win. UConn's beat everybody pretty much like that. I don't see anything changing tonight. So,
yeah, I think you're probably right. I'm gonna pull for the underdog, as you well know. I'll go with the underdog just about every single time. But anyway, yeah, I think UConn will probably win. But if I was going to place a bet, I would just for the hell of it place it on San Diego State. But it's been a fun tournament to watch. That's for sure. By the way, did you watch any of the women's national final yesterday?
No, I can't say I did.
I was going to ask you about Kim Mulkey's outfit, the LSU head coach.
I've seen her. She's got some funky stuff, but
you would think you would not need to dress like that, draw attention to yourself when your team's playing for the national title. Since we were probably listen, I had some thoughts on it yesterday when I was watching. I'm not going to share with the public. But anyway, that was kind of a strange outfit. She definitely. Did not mind some of the attention coming her way, but listen, they played really good against Iowa. It was an impressive showing by LSU. So anyway, all right, Fish. Well, listen, we covered a lot of football, a lot of recruiting. There will be some iteration of Osceola staff members back here on Wednesday. It will likely be myself, Bob, and Curt as we review Tuesday's practice and. Fish, by the way, there's a rumor going around that KJ Bolden is on campus today. You got any thoughts on KJ?
Well, I mean, he's probably the best safety prospect, one of them in the country. You definitely would like to add someone like that to your roster. I believe I have him rated the number 1 safety, definitely in Georgia. So he's a 5-star kid. Can't have enough of those elite guys. Nope.
And they are look they're putting themselves in position to recruit more and more of these elite guys as each day passes, because they have, as we said many times now over the last couple of weeks, they are putting in the work for sure. All right. Well, if you're not an Osceola subscriber, but you watch our podcast or watch our video cast and listen to our podcast, please go to theosceola.com or floridastate.rivals.com. They will take you to the same place. And you can check out, we do have some free content, but we do have our live thread from Saturday. We have pictures of these guys arriving at campus and then video interviews of them as they're leaving campus for an unofficial visit. Of course, we've got Curt and Bob's coverage of the scrimmage that we did not get to see, but they broke down what the coaches had to say. And obviously, the team will not be scrimmaging this Saturday. We do know that. The kids will be off for sure. But we've got plenty of content at theosceola.com or floridastate.rivals.com. Follow us at Osceola Rivals on Twitter. We've got the Osceola YouTube channel you can subscribe to. And obviously we have the Osceola Facebook page so that you will not miss out on any of our coverage. Fish, I know you're a very busy man. I appreciate you joining us always. And we look forward to seeing you again on the next edition of the Osceola Seminole Sideline Pass. And we hope you have a great Monday and Tuesday, and we will see you on Wednesday.
Thanks for having me on.